The grandfather clock in Thornfield Manor chimed midnight as William's trembling hands held the unopened letter that would either heal a 20-year wound or destroy what remained of his fractured family forever. Outside, storm clouds gathered like vultures over the estate where two brothers had once played as children, unaware that their bond would one day shatter into pieces sharp enough to draw blood. The letter bore Harry's desperate handwriting, and William knew that once he made his choice, to deliver it or destroy it, there would be no turning back from the path that had already claimed too much. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Thornfield Manor as William Thornfield stood at his study window, watching the groundskeepers tend to the rose garden his mother had planted 40 years ago. At 52, William carried himself with the rigid posture of a man who had learned that showing weakness invited destruction. His graying hair was meticulously combed, his navy suit pressed to perfection, yet the deep lines around his eyes betrayed sleepless nights and endless worry. The estate sprawled before him like a living testament to 5 generations of Thornfield prosperity. Rolling hills dotted with ancient oak trees stretched toward the horizon, while the manor itself stood as a monument to old money and older grudges. William had inherited not just the property, but the weight of family expectations and the bitter responsibility of protecting the Thornfield name at any cost. His morning routine was interrupted by the soft knock of Mrs. Pemberton, the housekeeper who had served the family for over 30 years. Her weathered face bore the kind of wisdom that came from witnessing decades of family drama while maintaining absolute discretion. "Master William, there's been another incident at the East Gate," she said quietly, her hands folded precisely at her waist. "The photographers are becoming more aggressive. Jenkins had to call the constable twice yesterday." William's jaw tightened. The media attention had intensified ever since the business scandal broke 3 months ago. The Thornfield Investment Group, built over generations, was crumbling under allegations of fraud and embezzlement. Though William had been cleared of any wrongdoing, the family name was tainted, and vultures circled daily hoping for fresh meat. "Double the security detail," William ordered, turning from the window. "I won't have them turning this estate into a circus." Mrs. Pemberton nodded, but hesitated at the door. "Sir, there's something else. Jenkins mentioned seeing a figure near the old chapel ruins last night. Someone was asking questions about Master Harry in the village." The mention of his brother's name hit William like a physical blow. Harry Thornfield, the golden child, the charismatic younger brother who had once been William's closest friend and fiercest rival. They hadn't spoken in 20 years, not since that terrible night when accusations flew like bullets and trust died in the crossfire. William's relationship with Harry had been complicated from birth. As the elder son, William was groomed for responsibility, taught to value duty and tradition above personal desires. Harry, born 3 years later, possessed the natural charm and rebellious spirit that made him beloved by everyone except their stern father. Where William excelled in business and strategy, Harry thrived in relationships and creativity. Their childhood was filled with both fierce competition and genuine affection. They would race horses through the countryside, challenge each other at chess, and share whispered conversations about their dreams for the future. Harry wanted to be an artist, to travel the world and capture its beauty on canvas. William dreamed of expanding the family business, of building an empire that would secure the Thornfield legacy for generations. The fracture began in their 20s when Harry fell in love with Sarah Mitchell, a local girl from a middle-class family. Their father, Edmund Thornfield, was furious. He demanded that Harry end the relationship and marry within their social circle. Harry refused, and the family war began. William found himself caught in the middle, trying to mediate between his brother's passionate rebellion and his father's iron will. He genuinely loved Harry and wanted to support his happiness, but he also understood the practical implications of the family's social standing and business connections. The breaking point came during Christmas dinner in 2003. Harry had secretly married Sarah in a small ceremony, presenting their father with a fait accompli. Edmund's rage was volcanic, and he immediately moved to disinherit Harry. In the heated argument that followed, accusations were made that cut deeper than any sword. Harry accused William of being their father's puppet, of caring more about money than family. William, pushed to his limit, responded with cruel words about Harry's selfishness and irresponsibility. The fight escalated until Harry stormed out, swearing he would never return to Thornfield Manor. What made the estrangement permanent was the business crisis that followed. The family company faced a hostile takeover, and Harry's inheritance, his shares in the business, became crucial to maintaining control. Harry refused to return or sign the necessary papers, claiming he wanted nothing to do with the corrupt empire his family had built. William was forced to choose between saving the business and reconciling with his brother. He chose the business, using legal maneuvering to block Harry's shares and maintain control. The move saved Thornfield Investment Group, but destroyed any hope of reconciliation. In the 20 years since, William had built the company into a financial powerhouse, while Harry disappeared into obscurity. Occasionally, William would hear rumors. Harry was living in France, painting landscapes. Harry had opened a gallery in New York. Harry's wife had died in a car accident. But they never spoke, and the gulf between them seemed to widen with each passing year. Now, with the company facing its greatest crisis and the family name under attack, William found himself thinking more and more about the brother he had lost. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had sacrificed his relationship with Harry to save the business, only to watch that same business crumble decades later. The morning progressed with its usual rhythm of crisis management. William's assistant, Margaret, briefed him on the latest legal developments while his security chief, a former military man named Colonel Richards, updated him on the media situation. The phones rang constantly with calls from lawyers, accountants, and family friends offering condolences and advice. By afternoon, William was exhausted from the relentless pressure. He retreated to his private study, a book-lined sanctuary where he could think without interruption. The room was dominated by a massive mahogany desk that had belonged to his grandfather, and the walls were covered with portraits of Thornfield ancestors stretching back to the 1800s. As he reviewed financial documents, trying to find a path through the legal maze that threatened to destroy everything he had built, William's mind kept returning to Harry. What would his brother think of this situation? Would he feel vindicated, seeing the empire William had chosen over family loyalty crumbling into dust? Or would he feel sorrow for the destruction of something their grandfather had worked so hard to create? The afternoon light was fading when Jenkins, the head groundskeeper, knocked on the study door. A man in his 60s with the weathered hands of someone who had spent his life working outdoors, Jenkins had been with the family since the boys were children. "Begging your pardon, Master William," Jenkins said, his cap clutched in his hands. "But there's something I think you should know. That fellow who was asking about Master Harry yesterday, he's been back. Says he's got a message to deliver." William's heart began to race. "What kind of message?" "He wouldn't say, sir. Just that it was urgent and personal. Said he'd wait by the old chapel until midnight if necessary." The old chapel ruins held special significance for the Thornfield family. Built in the 1600s by the first Thornfield to own the estate, it had been partially destroyed by fire in the 1800s and left as a romantic ruin. As children, William and Harry had played among the crumbling stones, creating elaborate fantasy games and sharing their deepest secrets. William made his decision quickly. "Have Colonel Richards accompany me. We'll meet this messenger at sunset." As evening approached, William walked through the estate grounds toward the chapel ruins. The familiar path was lined with ancient yew trees that cast deep shadows in the fading light. Colonel Richards walked silently beside him, alert for any sign of threat. The messenger was waiting exactly where Jenkins had said he would be, a thin man in his 40s wearing a worn leather jacket. He had the nervous energy of someone carrying a burden he desperately wanted to shed. "Mr. William Thornfield?" the man asked, stepping forward. "I am," William replied, his voice carefully neutral. The messenger reached into his jacket and withdrew a sealed envelope. The paper was cream-colored and expensive, and William's name was written across the front in handwriting he recognized immediately. His breath caught in his throat. "This is from your brother," the messenger said simply. "He asked me to deliver it personally and to wait for your response if you chose to give one." William stared at the letter as if it were a poisonous snake. 20 years of silence, 20 years of carefully constructed walls around his heart, and now Harry was reaching across that void with a simple piece of paper. How long have you been waiting? William asked. 3 days, the man replied. Mr. Harry said this was important enough to wait a week if necessary. William took the letter with hands that trembled slightly. The weight of it seemed disproportionate to its actual mass, as if it contained not just words but the accumulated pain and regret of 2 decades. Tell him, William said slowly, that I received his message. I'll send my response tomorrow. The messenger nodded and melted back into the growing darkness, leaving William alone with Colonel Richards and the most important piece of mail he had ever received. Back in his study, William sat staring at the unopened envelope for hours. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 9, then 10, then 11. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all day finally broke, sending rain against the windows and sheets. What could Harry possibly want to say after 20 years? Was this an attempt at reconciliation, or was his brother finally ready to deliver the condemnation William had been dreading? Had Harry heard about the business troubles and come to gloat, or was he offering help? The possibilities swirled through William's mind like the storm outside. He thought about their childhood, about the brother who had once been his best friend and greatest companion. He thought about the choices he had made, the bridges he had burned, and the price of the power he had fought so hard to maintain. As midnight approached, William finally broke the seal and began to read the letter that would change everything. The letter trembled in William's hands as he read the familiar handwriting that transported him back decades to childhood notes passed between brothers during boring family dinners and secret messages hidden in their shared bedroom. My dear brother, it began, and already William felt his carefully constructed emotional walls beginning to crack. The formality of dear brother rather than simply William suggested both respect and distance, a recognition of the years that had passed, and the pain that lay between them. Harry's words flowed across the expensive paper like water finding its way through stone. He wrote about Sarah's death 3 years earlier, a loss that had devastated him in ways he was only beginning to understand. William's throat constricted as he read about his brother's grief, about nights spent alone in their small cottage in the French countryside, surrounded by paintings that would never sell and memories that would never fade. I know you may find this difficult to believe, Harry continued, but not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you. In my anger and pride, I convinced myself that I was better off alone, that I had chosen love over money and was somehow morally superior. But grief has a way of stripping away our self-deceptions, and I see now that I abandoned not just our father's empire, but the brother who meant more to me than any fortune ever could. William had to stop reading several times, overcome by emotions he had spent 20 years suppressing. The brother he remembered was passionate and impulsive, quick to anger, but equally quick to forgive. This Harry seemed tempered by loss and time, his words carrying a weight of hard-earned wisdom. The letter went on to explain Harry's current situation. He was broke, his health was failing, and the small gallery he had opened in Provence was facing foreclosure. But more than financial help, he was seeking something money couldn't buy. Reconciliation with the family he had lost through his own stubborn pride. I've been following the troubles with the company, Harry wrote. I know the media is painting you as a villain, but I also know the boy who used to sneak me extra dessert when father wasn't looking, who taught me to ride a horse, and helped me through nightmares after mother died. That boy grew into a man of honor, whatever mistakes he may have made along the way. The most devastating part of the letter came near the end. Harry revealed that he was dying, pancreatic cancer, diagnosed 6 months ago. The doctors had given him perhaps a year, maybe less. He wasn't asking for pity or even help. He simply wanted the chance to see his brother one last time, to make peace before it was too late. I'm coming to England next week, the letter concluded. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect you to welcome me back into your life. But I had to try. I had to take this one last chance to tell you that I'm sorry for the pain I caused, sorry for the years we lost, and sorry that it took the prospect of death to make me swallow my pride. The letter was signed simply Harry, followed by a postscript that made William's heart stop. I've enclosed a key to our old hiding place in the chapel. If you decide you want to see me, leave a message there. If not, I'll understand and respect your choice. William sat in stunned silence as rain continued to lash against the windows. The grandfather clock chimed midnight, marking the transition from one day to another, from one phase of his life to whatever would come next. The key Harry had mentioned fell from the envelope onto the desk, a small brass key that William recognized immediately. As children, he and Harry had discovered a loose stone in the chapel ruins that created a perfect hiding place for their treasures. They had hidden birthday gifts for each other there, secret notes to their mother, and, once, a bottle of wine they had stolen from their father's cellar. The key opened a small wooden box they had buried deeper in the hiding place when they were 12 and 10, filled with childhood mementos and sworn promises of eternal brotherhood. The weight of decision pressed down on William like a physical force. For 20 years, he had told himself that Harry's absence was Harry's choice, that his brother could return anytime he wanted to apologize. Now, faced with the reality of Harry's illness and the genuine remorse in his letter, William could no longer hide behind righteous anger. He thought about the business crisis that had consumed his life for the past 3 months. The investigations, the media attention, the constant pressure to defend decisions he had made in good faith. All of it suddenly seemed less important than the dying brother who had finally found the courage to reach out. But William also thought about the guards who watched the estate day and night, about the reporters who would love nothing more than to photograph a reunion between the estranged Thornfield brothers. Any public reconciliation would become a media circus, potentially making the business situation even worse. More troubling was the question of Harry's motives. Was this really about reconciliation, or was his brother hoping to claim his inheritance before he died? The company was worth less than it had been 6 months ago, but Harry's shares could still be worth millions if he played his cards right. William spent the next hour pacing his study, the letter clutched in his hands as he wrestled with emotions and calculations in equal measure. The rational part of his mind, the part that had successfully run a major corporation for 2 decades, urged caution. Harry's timing was suspicious, and any public reunion could be disastrous for what remained of the family reputation. But the brother in him, the part that remembered midnight conversations and shared adventures, wanted nothing more than to race to the chapel immediately and leave a message that would bring Harry home. At 1 a.m, William made his decision. He would meet Harry, but carefully and secretly. He wrote a brief note suggesting they meet at a small inn 20 miles from the estate, somewhere they could talk privately without attracting attention. He included his private mobile number and suggested Harry call to arrange the specific details. Grabbing a flashlight and an umbrella, William made his way through the storm to the chapel ruins. The ancient stones seemed to glow eerily in the lightning flashes, and for a moment he felt like a child again, sneaking out for some forbidden adventure with his younger brother. The hiding place was exactly where he remembered it, though it took several minutes of searching to find the loose stone in the darkness. His fingers were numb with cold as he worked the stone free and reached into the cavity beyond. The wooden box was still there, covered with decades of dust and moisture, but remarkably intact. William's heart raced as he opened it, revealing the childhood treasures they had hidden so long ago. A carved wooden horse Harry had made for him, a pressed flower from their mother's funeral, and a note they had written promising to be brothers forever, no matter what. William placed his message next to these forgotten relics and sealed the box again, replacing it in its hiding place and covering the opening with the loose stone. As he walked back to the manor through the driving rain, he felt as if he were crossing a bridge between his past and an uncertain future. The next morning brought a call that changed everything. William was reviewing legal documents in his study when his private line rang. The voice on the other end was older and weaker than he remembered, but unmistakably Harry's. "William? It's me." For a moment, neither brother spoke. 20 years of separation seemed to collapse into that single moment of recognition, and William felt tears he had been holding back for decades threatening to spill over. "Harry," William finally managed. "I got your letter. I got your message too," Harry replied, and William could hear the emotion in his brother's voice. "Thank you for responding. I wasn't sure you would." They arranged to meet that afternoon at the Copper Kettle Inn, a small establishment in the village of Little Thornfield where they were unlikely to be recognized. William spent the morning in a state of nervous energy, unable to concentrate on work or think about anything except the approaching reunion. At 2 o'clock, William drove to the inn alone, having told Colonel Richards only that he had personal business to attend to. The Copper Kettle was a traditional English pub with low ceilings, dark wood beams, and small windows that created an atmosphere of intimate privacy. Harry was already there when William arrived, sitting in a corner booth with his back to the room. 20 years had changed him dramatically. His once thick brown hair was now gray and thinning. His face was gaunt with illness, and his clothes hung loosely on a frame that had lost considerable weight. But his eyes were the same warm brown William remembered, and his smile, though weaker than before, still carried the same gentle humor that had made him so beloved as a child. "Hello, William," Harry said quietly as his brother approached the table. "Hello, Harry." They sat across from each other in awkward silence for several minutes, neither quite sure how to bridge the enormous gap between them. Finally, Harry spoke. "You look good," he said. "Distinguished. Father would have been proud of what you've built." William felt a bitter laugh escape his throat. "What I've built is crumbling around me. The newspapers call me a criminal. The government is investigating every transaction we've made in the past 5 years, and I may lose everything grandfather and father worked to create." Harry studied his brother's face with the keen eye of an artist trained to see beyond surface appearances. "But you didn't do anything criminal, did you?" "No," William replied without hesitation. "But that doesn't seem to matter anymore." They talked for 3 hours, carefully navigating the minefield of their shared history while trying to rebuild some connection across the years of silence. Harry spoke about his life in France, about his struggles as an artist, and his deep love for Sarah. He described her final illness with heartbreaking detail, and William found himself grieving for a sister-in-law he had never had the chance to know. William, in turn, found himself opening up about the loneliness of his position, the weight of responsibility he had carried alone for so long, and his growing realization that professional success had come at the cost of personal happiness. He had never married, had no children, and was facing the possibility of being the last Thornfield to bear the family name. As the afternoon wore on, William felt the old connection reasserting itself. Harry was still fundamentally the same person he had been as a child, kind, thoughtful, and possessed of an innate wisdom that complemented William's more analytical nature. The years had seasoned him, made him deeper and more reflective, but the essential Harry remained unchanged. When it came time to part, both brothers were reluctant to end the reunion. They made tentative plans to meet again the following week, this time at the estate if William could arrange security that would keep the meeting private. "William," Harry said as they prepared to leave, "I want you to know that I don't expect anything from you. I'm not here to claim inheritance or to complicate your business problems. I just wanted to see my brother again before it was too late." William believed him. The man sitting across from him was clearly sincere, clearly dying, and clearly motivated by nothing more complex than love and regret. For the first time in 20 years, William felt a spark of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other before it was too late. But as he drove back to Thornfield Manor, William's mind was already working on the practical problems. How could he manage a reconciliation without attracting media attention? How could he protect both Harry and the family reputation while still honoring the emotional connection they had rediscovered? The answers to those questions would prove more complicated than either brother could have imagined. The week following William's reunion with Harry passed in a blur of clandestine phone calls and careful planning. William found himself energized by the prospect of reconnecting with his brother, but also increasingly paranoid about maintaining secrecy. The media attention surrounding the business scandal had intensified, with reporters camping outside the estate gates and following his car whenever he left the property. Colonel Richards noticed the change in his employer's behavior immediately. William was taking unusual routes when he drove anywhere, making unexplained stops, and asking detailed questions about the security protocols around the estate. When pressed, William claimed he was simply being more cautious given the increased media pressure. But Richards remained suspicious. "Sir," Richards said during their daily security briefing, "I've noticed some irregularities in your movements this week. If there's something I should know about, a threat, a meeting, anything that might affect the security situation. I need to be informed. William studied the former military man carefully. Richards had been with the family for 5 years, ever since the previous security chief had retired. He was competent, discreet, and absolutely loyal to the Thornfield family interests. But William wasn't sure he was ready to trust anyone with the secret of Harry's return. I'm simply trying to be unpredictable, William replied. If the reporters can't establish a pattern to my movements, they can't anticipate where I'll be. Richards accepted this explanation, but William could see the doubt in his eyes. The security chief was trained to notice details, and details were beginning to accumulate in ways that might eventually reveal the truth. The bigger problem was Mrs. Pemberton. The housekeeper had worked for the family long enough to know both brothers intimately, and she had noticed William's changed mood immediately. She also had the uncomfortable habit of knowing things before William told her about them, a quality that had made her invaluable as a household manager but dangerous as a keeper of secrets. Master William, she said during their weekly household meeting, might I suggest having the guest suite aired and refreshed? It seems to me that it would be wise to be prepared for unexpected visitors. William looked at her sharply. The guest suite hadn't been used in over a year, and there was no reason to prepare it unless she somehow knew about Harry. What makes you think we might have visitors, Mrs. Pemberton? The elderly woman's face remained perfectly neutral, but William caught the slightest twinkle in her eyes. Just a feeling, sir. Sometimes the old manor seems to know things before we do. William realized that trying to keep secrets from Mrs. Pemberton was probably futile. She had raised both him and Harry, had been present for every family crisis and celebration for 3 decades, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to read the emotional temperature of the household. The guest suite should always be ready, he said carefully. Please see to it. Of course, sir. And might I also suggest that cook prepare some of Master Harry's favorite foods? Just in case his dietary preferences should become relevant again. William's heart skipped a beat. Mrs. Pemberton definitely knew something, though he couldn't imagine how she had found out. Either she had somehow learned about the meeting at the inn, or her intuition was even more formidable than he had realized. The second meeting with Harry was scheduled for Saturday afternoon. William had arranged for Harry to be driven to the estate in an unmarked car, entering through a service gate that was rarely monitored by the media. They would meet in the old stable block, which had been converted into a private office space years earlier, and offered complete privacy from both reporters and household staff. Friday night, William barely slept. He found himself alternately excited about seeing Harry again and terrified about the potential consequences. The business investigation was reaching a critical phase, and any distraction could be disastrous. But the thought of his dying brother waiting alone in some hotel room, hoping for reconciliation, was more than William could bear. Saturday dawned gray and drizzling, with low clouds that seemed to press down on the estate like a suffocating blanket. William spent the morning in his study, ostensibly working on legal documents, but actually staring out the window and rehearsing conversations in his mind. At noon, his private phone rang. William? It's Harry. I'm at the service gate. I'll meet you at the stables in 5 minutes. William walked through the estate grounds with his heart pounding, taking a circuitous route that kept him away from the main buildings and any windows where staff members might see him. The stable block sat at the far end of the property, surrounded by tall hedges that provided excellent privacy. Harry was waiting inside, studying the renovation work that had transformed the horse stalls into a comfortable office space. He looked even more frail than he had the previous week, and William felt a stab of alarm at how quickly his brother seemed to be declining. Impressive, Harry said, running his hand along the polished wood paneling. You've done a beautiful job with this restoration. Thank you, William replied, then found himself at a loss for words. The easy conversation of their previous meeting seemed harder to recapture in this setting, surrounded by the weight of family history and unresolved conflicts. They sat across from each other in leather chairs that had once belonged to their grandfather, and for several minutes neither spoke. Finally, Harry broke the silence. I've been thinking about what you said last week, about the business troubles. Have you considered that this might be an opportunity? William looked at him in surprise. An opportunity for what? To start over. To build something new that reflects your values rather than just continuing what previous generations created. Harry, we're talking about a company worth hundreds of millions of pounds. I can't just walk away from that responsibility. Can't you? Harry asked gently. What if the price of saving it is your soul? They talked for 2 hours about business, family, and the choices that had shaped their lives. Harry's perspective, informed by years of living simply and pursuing art rather than profit, challenged many of William's fundamental assumptions about success and responsibility. I used to think you were naive, William admitted. When you walked away from all of this to marry Sarah and paint pictures, I thought you were throwing your life away. And now I wonder if you were the brave one. You chose love over obligation, authenticity over expectation. Maybe that takes more courage than I ever had. Harry smiled sadly. We both made choices, William. I don't regret marrying Sarah or pursuing art, but I do regret the way I handled it. I should have found a way to follow my heart without abandoning my family. As the afternoon progressed, William found himself sharing details about the business crisis that he had never discussed with anyone else. The weight of carrying it alone had been crushing, and Harry's sympathetic listening provided a relief he hadn't realized he needed. Have you thought about bringing in outside help? Harry asked. Someone without ties to the family who could provide an objective perspective? The lawyers want to handle everything through litigation. They think we can win in court and restore the family reputation. But what do you think? William was quiet for a long moment. I think the damage may already be done. Even if we win every lawsuit, even if we're completely exonerated, people will always wonder. The Thornfield name may never recover. Then, maybe it's time for a new name. A new beginning. They were interrupted by the sound of footsteps outside the stable block. William tensed, moving to the window to see who was approaching. Through the glass, he could see Colonel Richards walking purposefully toward the building, accompanied by 2 men in dark suits. Stay here, William whispered to Harry, then stepped outside to intercept the security chief. Sir, Richards said formally, we have a situation. These gentlemen are with Scotland Yard, and they have a warrant to search the premises. William's blood turned to ice. A police search of the estate, with Harry hidden in the stables, could destroy any chance of keeping their reunion secret. More importantly, if the detectives discovered Harry's presence and learned about his potential claim to company shares, it could complicate the investigation in ways that might prove disastrous. What are they looking for? William asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Financial records, computer files, anything related to the investment fraud allegations, replied Detective Inspector Morrison, a thin man with sharp eyes and an unforgiving expression. We also need to examine any correspondence with business partners, family members, or associates. The emphasis on family members made William's heart race. Did they already know about Harry's letter? Had someone intercepted their communications or observed their meetings? Of course, William said. I'll provide full cooperation. However, I do have some personal family matters to attend to this afternoon. Perhaps we could schedule the search for tomorrow? Detective Inspector Morrison shook his head. I'm afraid we need to conduct the search immediately, sir. The warrant is quite specific about timing. William realized he had to make a choice. He could try to delay the search and hope Harry could escape unnoticed, or he could find a way to protect his brother while maintaining his own cooperation with the investigation. Very well, William said. I'll have my assistant gather the relevant documents. Colonel Richards will escort you to my office to begin. As the group moved toward the main house, William caught Richards' eye and made a subtle gesture toward the stables. The security chief nodded almost imperceptibly, understanding that his employer needed time to handle whatever was in the converted building. William waited until the police were inside the manor before rushing back to Harry. We have a problem, he said quickly. Scotland Yard is here with a search warrant. You need to leave immediately. Harry's face went pale, but he remained calm. Will this cause trouble for you? I don't know, but I can't risk them finding you here. If they discover your existence and your potential claim to company shares, it could complicate everything. Then, I'll go, Harry said simply, standing up despite his obvious weakness. Wait. William grabbed his brother's arm gently. Harry, I need you to know that whatever happens with this investigation, whatever the future holds for the company or the family name, I'm glad you came back. I'm glad we had this chance to talk. Harry's eyes filled with tears. So am I. They embraced for the first time in 20 years, a brief but emotional reunion that seemed to carry the weight of all their lost time and shared regrets. "I'll call you," William promised as Harry prepared to leave through the service entrance. "I'll be waiting," Harry replied. But as Harry walked away into the gray afternoon, William had a terrible premonition that he was watching his brother leave for the last time. The police investigation, the media attention, the family crisis. Everything seemed to be conspiring to keep them apart just when they had finally found each other again. William returned to the manor to find the police methodically searching his study. Detective Inspector Morrison looked up as he entered. "Sir, we'll need to examine all correspondence from the past 5 years, including any personal letters or family communications." William's heart sank. If they demanded to see Harry's letter, if they discovered the secret reunion, if they learned about his brother's existence and potential financial claims, it could destroy any hope of reconciliation and potentially make the business situation much worse. "I'll have everything gathered for you," William said, praying he could find a way to protect his brother while still cooperating with the investigation. As the police continued their methodical search, William realized that the simple act of reconnecting with Harry had created complications he never could have anticipated. The letter that had brought them back together was now a potential threat to everything William had worked to protect. The irony was devastating. Just when he and Harry had begun to heal their relationship, forces beyond their control were threatening to tear them apart again. The police search continued until well past midnight, with Detective Inspector Morrison and his team methodically examining every document, every computer file, and every piece of correspondence in William's study. William sat in tense silence, watching as they cataloged his life's work while praying they wouldn't discover any trace of Harry's return. Mrs. Pemberton appeared periodically with tea and sandwiches, her face a mask of perfect household efficiency, but William caught the worried glances she shot in his direction. She knew something was terribly wrong, even if she didn't understand the full scope of the crisis. At one point, Detective Inspector Morrison held up a stack of personal letters, including several pieces of correspondence from family friends and business associates. "We'll need to examine all of these," he said. "Any communication that might be relevant to the investigation." William's mouth went dry. Harry's letter was locked in his desk drawer, along with his own handwritten response that he had never sent. If the police found those documents, they would immediately realize that Harry was alive, in England, and potentially involved in the family business crisis. "Of course," William replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Though I should mention that some of those are quite personal. Condolence letters about my mother's death last year, correspondence with old friends. Hardly relevant to any business investigation." Morrison studied William carefully. "We'll determine what's relevant, sir. Please unlock your desk drawers." William's hands trembled slightly as he produced the keys. The detective began systematically examining the contents of each drawer, and William watched in growing panic as he approached the one containing Harry's letter. Just as Morrison reached for the drawer handle, Colonel Richards appeared in the doorway. "Inspector Morrison, there's been a development. We've found something in the basement records room that you'll want to see immediately." The detective paused, his hand still on the drawer. "What kind of something?" "Financial documents that predate the time period you're investigating. They might provide important context for your case." Morrison hesitated, clearly torn between continuing his examination of the desk and pursuing this new lead. After a moment, he decided to follow Richards, leaving one of his subordinates to continue cataloging the study contents. William realized that Richards had deliberately created a distraction, buying him precious time to deal with Harry's letter. The security chief's loyalty went deeper than William had imagined, and he was risking his own reputation to protect his employer. When the remaining officer stepped out to confer with his superior, William quickly opened the problematic drawer and retrieved Harry's letter and his own unfinished response. Without thinking clearly, he shoved both documents inside his jacket, knowing that being caught with them would be disastrous, but unable to think of any alternative. The search finally ended at 2 in the morning, with the police departing after confiscating several boxes of financial records and computer hard drives. William watched from his study window as their cars disappeared down the estate's long driveway, carrying away pieces of his professional life that might never be returned. Colonel Richards appeared in the doorway, as William slumped exhaustedly in his chair. "Are you all right, sir?" "That depends on what they found in the basement," William replied wearily. "Nothing of consequence. I needed to give you time to handle whatever was in that desk drawer." William looked at the security chief with new respect. "How did you know?" "I've been doing this job for 25 years, sir. I know the signs of a man trying to protect something important. The question is whether you handled it properly." William touched the letters inside his jacket. "I hope so." The next morning brought disturbing news. Mrs. Pemberton knocked on William's bedroom door at 7 o'clock, her usual composure shaken by obvious distress. "Master William, there's been an incident. Someone broke into the chapel ruins last night. The police think it might be connected to the search of the house." William's heart stopped. The chapel, where he and Harry had hidden their childhood treasures, where they had communicated through secret messages. If the police had discovered their hiding place, if they had found evidence of recent activity there, it could lead them directly to Harry. He dressed quickly and walked to the ruins, accompanied by Colonel Richards and a constable from the local police station. The damage was immediately obvious. Someone had scattered stones and debris around the area where William had hidden his message to Harry. The old hiding place was exposed, its contents scattered across the ground. "Vandals, most likely," the constable said dismissively. "We get kids out here sometimes, looking for buried treasure or just making mischief." But William could see that this wasn't random vandalism. Someone had known exactly where to look, had searched systematically through the ruins until they found what they were seeking. The question was whether they had found anything incriminating. Kneeling among the scattered stones, William searched frantically for any trace of the childhood treasures he and Harry had hidden decades ago. The carved wooden horse was missing, as was the pressed flower from their mother's funeral. Most importantly, the note they had written promising to be brothers forever was gone. Someone had taken everything, and William had a terrible suspicion about who that someone might be. He called Harry's hotel immediately, using his mobile phone to avoid any possibility of the call being monitored. "Mr. Thornfield's room," the hotel operator said. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Thornfield checked out early this morning." "Did he leave a forwarding address?" "No, sir. He settled his bill and departed without any additional information." William felt the world spinning around him. Harry was gone. The police were investigating the family business, and someone had discovered their secret communication method. The timing couldn't be coincidental. The answer came 3 hours later in a phone call from Detective Inspector Morrison. "Mr. Thornfield, we need to speak with you again. We've received some additional information about your family situation that may be relevant to our investigation." "What kind of information?" "Information about a brother who may have claims against your company. Information about secret meetings and hidden communications. We'll be returning to the estate this afternoon with additional warrants." William's blood turned to ice. Someone had betrayed them, had provided the police with enough details about Harry's return to justify expanded investigation. But who? And why? The answer came in the form of a familiar figure walking up the estate's main drive. Through his study window, William watched in disbelief as Harry approached the front door, flanked by 2 police constables and carrying a briefcase that William didn't recognize. Mrs. Pemberton knocked on the study door moments later. "Master William, your brother is here to see you. He's with the police." William's world collapsed. Harry hadn't disappeared. He had gone to the authorities. The dying brother who had written such a heartfelt letter about reconciliation and regret had betrayed him to save himself. William walked to the front hall on unsteady legs, his mind racing to understand how everything had gone so wrong so quickly. Harry stood in the doorway, looking older and more frail than ever, but his eyes held a determination that William had never seen before. "Hello, William," Harry said quietly. "I think we need to talk." Detective Inspector Morrison stepped forward. "Mr. William Thornfield, we have a warrant to search the premises again, specifically looking for any communication with your brother Harry Thornfield regarding potential financial claims against Thornfield Investment Group." William stared at Harry in shocked betrayal. "Why?" he whispered. Harry's face was filled with pain, but also with resolve. "Because I had to choose between protecting you and protecting the truth. And I realized that protecting you from the truth isn't really protecting you at all." "I don't understand." "The business crisis, William. The investigation. It's not about fraud or embezzlement." Harry opened his briefcase and withdrew a thick stack of documents. It's about money that was stolen from my inheritance 20 years ago. Money that was used to cover up father's gambling debts and keep the company from bankruptcy. William felt the floor give way beneath him. That's impossible. I hired investigators, William. After Sarah died, I needed to know the truth about why you had really fought so hard to keep me from claiming my shares. I thought it was about power and control, but it was actually about covering up father's massive debts to some very dangerous people. Detective Inspector Morrison took the documents from Harry. Mr. Harry Thornfield has provided us with evidence that approximately £15 million was illegally diverted from his inheritance account to cover debts incurred by your father, Edmund Thornfield. The money was used to pay off gambling obligations to organized crime figures, and the transactions were disguised as routine business expenses. William's mind reeled as the implications hit him. I didn't know. I swear to you, Harry, I had no idea about any gambling debts or organized crime connections. I fought to keep your shares because I thought you were being irresponsible, abandoning the family during a legitimate business crisis. Harry's eyes filled with tears. I know you didn't know. That's why I had to come forward now. The current investigation isn't really about anything you did wrong. It's about what father did 20 years ago and how those transactions are finally being discovered. But why now? Why did you wait so long to? Because I didn't know either, Harry interrupted. I spent 20 years believing you had chosen money over family, hating you for what I thought was greed and callousness. It wasn't until after Sarah died that I had the motivation to dig deep enough to uncover the truth. Detective Inspector Morrison cleared his throat. Gentlemen, we have a great deal of paperwork to process. Mr. Harry Thornfield, you'll need to provide a full statement about your discoveries. Mr. William Thornfield, you'll need to make yourself available for questioning about your knowledge of these historical transactions. As the police began their work, William and Harry found themselves alone for a few moments in the front hall where they had said goodbye 20 years earlier. Harry, William said desperately, I understand why you had to come forward with the truth. But couldn't you have warned me? Couldn't you have found a way to protect me while still doing the right thing? Harry looked at his brother with infinite sadness. I tried to find another way, William. I spent weeks trying to figure out how to handle this without destroying you. But I realized that the cover-up had already destroyed too much of our family. I couldn't let it claim whatever time I have left. So you chose justice over family. I chose honesty over comfortable lies. The same choice I should have made 20 years ago. William felt everything he had worked for, everything he had sacrificed Harry's relationship to protect, crumbling around him. The bitter irony was overwhelming. Harry had returned not to reconcile, but to deliver the final blow to the empire William had chosen over their brotherhood. I forgive you, William said quietly, and meant it. I understand why you had to do this. But I need you to know that losing you again, especially like this, may be more than I can bear. Harry reached out and took his brother's hand. You're not losing me, William. For the first time in 20 years, we can be honest with each other. We can build something real on the truth instead of trying to preserve something false built on lies. As the police continued their methodical documentation of the family's financial history, the two brothers sat together in the study where their father had once conducted business, surrounded by the portraits of ancestors who had built the Thornfield empire through means they had never fully understood. The letter that had brought them back together was no longer hidden in a desk drawer. It lay open on the table between them, a testament to the hope and pain that had survived 20 years of separation. Next to it was the evidence that would probably destroy the Thornfield business empire, but might finally set both brothers free from the lies that had shaped their entire lives. Outside, the storm that had been threatening all week finally broke in earnest, sending rain against the windows and sheets that seemed to wash away the past and prepare the ground for whatever uncertain future lay ahead. 6 months after Harry's revelation to the police, William stood in the empty halls of Thornfield Manor, watching movers carefully wrap the last of the family portraits. The investigation had concluded with a complex settlement that saw the dissolution of Thornfield Investment Group, the sale of most family assets to compensate defrauded investors, and the beginning of criminal proceedings against Edmund Thornfield's estate for the financial crimes committed decades earlier. The media had initially portrayed the story as a tale of corporate greed and family betrayal, but as the full truth emerged, public opinion had shifted. The revelation that Harry had sacrificed his own financial interests to expose his father's crimes, and that William had been manipulated by circumstances he never fully understood, transformed the narrative from one of villainy to one of tragedy and redemption. Harry had been vindicated in his decision to come forward, but the victory was bittersweet. The stress of the investigation and media attention had accelerated his illness, and the doctors now estimated he had perhaps 3 months left to live. He had chosen to spend those months at Thornfield Manor, in the home he had abandoned 20 years earlier, finally, reconciled with the brother he had never stopped loving. William found Harry in the old stable block, now converted into an art studio where he spent his remaining days painting landscapes of the estate grounds. Despite his physical deterioration, Harry's artistic skills had never been sharper, and he was working frantically to complete a series of paintings that would serve as his final gift to William. "How are you feeling today?" William asked, settling into the chair beside Harry's easel. "Like a man trying to capture 20 years of lost time in a few months," Harry replied, not looking up from his work, but grateful for the opportunity to try. The painting he was working on showed the chapel ruins at sunset, the ancient stones glowing with golden light that seemed to suggest both ending and eternal continuity. It was beautiful and heartbreaking, a perfect metaphor for their relationship and the family legacy they were leaving behind. "I had a call from the estate agent," Williams said. "We've received an offer on the property. A technology company wants to convert it into a corporate retreat center." Harry paused in his painting. "How do you feel about that?" "Oddly relieved," William admitted. "For so long I felt like I was carrying the weight of 5 generations of Thornfield history. The idea of passing that burden to someone else, of starting fresh somewhere new, feels liberating." "Where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet. Maybe somewhere warm where I can learn to relax for the first time in my adult life. Maybe somewhere I can figure out who William Thornfield is when he's not defined by family obligations and business responsibilities." Harry smiled, the expression transforming his gaunt features. "That sounds like a wonderful journey." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the afternoon light play across the estate grounds they had roamed as children. The grounds that would soon belong to someone else, that would host corporate meetings and executive retreats instead of family gatherings and childhood adventures. "William," Harry said eventually, "there's something I need to tell you about the letter." "What about it?" "When I wrote it, I already knew about Father's gambling debts. The private investigators I hired had uncovered most of the truth months before I contacted you." William felt a chill of apprehension. "Then, why didn't you mention it in the letter?" "Because I was still hoping I could find a way to protect you from the consequences. I thought maybe we could handle it privately, work out some kind of arrangement that would satisfy the authorities without destroying everything you had built. But you changed your mind. I realized that protecting you from the truth was exactly what got us into this mess in the first place. Father protected you from knowledge of his gambling. You protected me from knowledge of the family's financial problems. I protected myself from knowledge of your real motivations. All of this protection just created more lies and more pain." William absorbed this revelation slowly. "So the letter wasn't really about reconciliation. It was about preparing me for the truth." "No," Harry said firmly. "The letter was absolutely about reconciliation. Everything I wrote about missing you, about regretting our estrangement, about wanting to make peace before I die, all of that was completely true. The business investigation was separate from my emotional need to reconnect with my brother, but intertwined with it. Yes, and I'm sorry for that complication. I'm sorry that loving you and seeking justice became entangled in ways that made both more difficult." William reached over and took his brother's paint-stained hand. "I'm not sorry. I'm grateful that you found the courage to tell the truth, even when it was hard. I'm grateful that you chose our relationship over comfortable lies. And I'm grateful that we had these months together, even under these circumstances." Harry squeezed his brother's hand gently. "Do you think we would have found our way back to each other if I hadn't gotten sick? If the investigation hadn't forced the truth into the open?" "I don't know," William answered honestly. "I spent 20 years building walls around my heart, convincing myself that I was better off alone. It might have taken something dramatic to break through all of that self-protection. Or maybe we would have been too proud and too scared to take the first step. Maybe. But we did take that step, eventually. And I think that matters more than the timing or the circumstances. As the afternoon wore on, other family members began arriving at the manor. Cousins, aunts, uncles, and old family friends came to pay their respects to Harry and to witness the end of the Thornfield era. Many of them had been estranged from the family during the business scandal, but Harry's decision to expose the truth and William's graceful handling of the consequences had restored much of the family's reputation. Mrs. Pemberton had organized a farewell dinner in the grand dining room, using the finest china and crystal one last time before they were sold to pay creditors. The meal was both celebration and wake, honoring the good memories while acknowledging the painful truths that had shaped the family's history. During the dinner, Harry stood up to address the assembled family. He was so weak that William had to help him remain upright, but his voice carried clearly through the room. 20 years ago, I walked away from this family in anger and pride, he began. I convinced myself that I was choosing love over money, principle over compromise. But I now understand that I was really just choosing the easy path of self-righteous exile over the hard work of staying and fighting for what I believed in. He paused to catch his breath, and William felt the weight of his brother's frailty. My brother William stayed and fought. He carried burdens that should have been shared, made decisions that should have been collective, and bore responsibility for mistakes that weren't entirely his own. I'm not proud of abandoning him to that lonely struggle, but I am proud of how he handled it with grace and integrity. Harry turned to look directly at William. I want everyone here to know that my decision to expose our father's crimes wasn't about revenge or justice in any abstract sense. It was about giving my brother the truth he deserved, so that he could finally stop carrying shame that was never his to bear. The room was silent except for the soft sounds of crying from several family members. William felt tears streaming down his own face as he realized the full depth of his brother's love and sacrifice. The Thornfield name will survive this scandal, Harry continued, because it was built on more than money and business success. It was built on love, loyalty, and the willingness to do what's right even when it's costly. Those values will live on in all of us, wherever our paths may lead. After dinner, William and Harry walked through the estate grounds one last time together. Harry was too weak to walk far, so William pushed him in a wheelchair along the paths they had run down as children. They visited the old oak tree where they had built a treehouse, the pond where they had learned to fish, and, finally, the chapel ruins where their reconciliation had begun. I want you to have this, Harry said, reaching into his jacket pocket and withdrawing a small wrapped package. William opened it to find the carved wooden horse he had given Harry for Christmas when they were children, the same horse that had been hidden in the chapel ruins until someone discovered their secret cache. I thought this was lost when the police searched the chapel. I retrieved it before I went to the authorities. I knew that whoever had broken into the ruins might be watching, might be planning to use our childhood treasures against us somehow. I couldn't let that happen. Who do you think it was? Who broke into the chapel? Harry was quiet for a long moment. I think it might have been Father's old gambling associates. People who never got fully paid and who were looking for any leverage they could find against the family. The timing suggests they knew about the investigation before it became public. You mean we were never really safe? Even after Father died, his mistakes were still threatening the family. That's exactly why I had to come forward, William. The truth was going to emerge eventually, and it was better for us to control how it happened rather than wait for someone else to use it against us. They sat in the ruins as darkness fell, surrounded by the ancient stones that had witnessed generations of Thornfield secrets and sorrows. The hiding place where they had once buried childhood treasures was still visible, a small cavity in the stone wall that now seemed to symbolize all the family secrets that had finally been brought into the light. I keep thinking about that night 20 years ago, William said. The fight we had at Christmas dinner. If I could go back and handle it differently. We were both products of our father's expectations and our own fears, Harry interrupted. You felt responsible for holding the family together. I felt trapped by obligations I never chose. Neither of us understood the full scope of what we were really fighting about. Do you think Father knew how much damage his secrets would cause? I think father was a man drowning in his own mistakes, trying to keep his head above water without considering who else might get pulled under with him. He wasn't evil, just weak and scared and too proud to ask for help. As they prepared to return to the manor, William felt a profound sense of completion. The anger and resentment he had carried for 20 years was gone, replaced by a deep sadness for all the lost time, but also gratitude for the reconciliation they had achieved. "Harry," he said as they reached the front steps, "I need you to know that these past 6 months, despite all the chaos and loss, have been the happiest of my adult life. Having my brother back, being able to talk honestly about everything we've been through, has meant more to me than any business success or family reputation." "For me too," Harry replied. "I spent 20 years carrying guilt and anger that was slowly poisoning everything good in my life. Being able to make peace with you, to feel like a true brother again, has given me more joy than I thought was possible at this stage of my illness." 2 weeks later, Harry died peacefully in his sleep in the guest bedroom that Mrs. Pemberton had prepared with such prescient wisdom months earlier. William was at his bedside, holding his hand and talking softly about childhood memories and shared hopes for whatever comes after life. The funeral was held at the small parish church where their parents were buried, and the service was attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by Harry's art, his courage, or his final act of moral clarity. The investigation that had initially seemed like the destruction of the Thornfield family was now being remembered as Harry Thornfield's courageous decision to choose truth over comfort. William inherited Harry's paintings, including the unfinished landscape of the chapel ruins that captured both the beauty and the melancholy of their shared history. He also inherited something more valuable, the knowledge that love and honesty could survive even the most devastating revelations, and that it was never too late to choose truth over convenient lies. 6 months after the funeral, William stood on the balcony of a small cottage in Provence, France, watching the sun set over the vineyard-covered hills where Harry had lived with Sarah. He had used the remaining money from the estate sale to purchase the cottage, wanting to understand the life his brother had chosen and to continue the artistic legacy that Harry had left unfinished. On the easel beside him was his own attempt at painting, a clumsy but heartfelt landscape of Thornfield Manor as it had looked in their childhood, before business scandals and family secrets had cast shadows over its beauty. He would never be the artist his brother was, but he was learning to see the world through Harry's eyes, to find beauty in simple moments and honest emotions. The letter that had started their reconciliation was framed on the cottage wall, a reminder of the courage it takes to reach across years of silence and pain. Next to it hung Harry's final painting of the chapel ruins, forever capturing the place where their brotherhood had been broken and ultimately healed. As darkness fell over the French countryside, William felt his brother's presence in the gentle evening breeze and in the peaceful silence of a man finally at rest with the choices he had made. The Thornfield Empire was gone, but something more precious had taken its place, the knowledge that love can survive any truth and that it's never too late to choose family over fear. The last olive branch had burned, but from its ashes had grown something stronger and more beautiful than either brother had dared to imagine possible.